Good morning, everybody. Thank you for coming the second day. We start with, now we're going to watch the pre-recorded video message by the European Commissioner for the Mediterranean, Ms. Dubrovska-Šuica.
Dear participants, thank you very much for the opportunity to address you today. I am grateful to the OECD Crete Centre on Population Dynamics for holding this conference. Demographic trends are a horizontal challenge with profound implications on our societies. They lead to need for higher capacity and more people in medical and long-term care. They put considerable pressure on the sustainability of our pension systems, and they intensify labor shortages and impact our competitiveness. We are putting a particular focus on competitiveness in this commission in line with the Draghi report. For the active working population, we want to encourage and support member states to tackle the skills gaps. It will drive investments in lifelong learning and skills retention. We also need to invest in the basic skills of our youth for tomorrow's labor markets. We have adopted a new European Union STEM plan for science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Further, we need to increase the labor market participation for women across the board. More than 7 million women are outside the labor market in the European Union, mostly because they are busy with informal care of children or an elderly family member. We also need to remove the barriers through flexible working time models, better access to paid care, and quality childcare. And where we cannot fill labor shortages domestically, we will continue to draw on legal labor migration. At the same time, however, we would ideally increase our fertility rate. It is at a new historic low at 1.35 births per woman on average in the European Union. And here in Greece, it stands at 1.26. Career opportunities often coincide with a period when couples are planning to have children. People should have a choice. When they opt for taking time to look after their children, we should promote flexible or part-time working models. We also need to provide quality childcare to avoid either-or decisions. And we need to tackle housing. Families cannot settle down and grow if there is no sufficient housing or if it's not affordable. At the European Commission, we are implementing our demography toolbox. Reconciling family aspirations and paid work is one of the pillars. Healthy aging is another priority. And still this year, we will present an affordable housing plan and a legal initiative on short-term rentals online. Managing the demographic transition goes to the very heart of our social fabric. Dear ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your expert contributions. I wish you a productive and inspiring debate.
Okay, now we move on with our third session. The first session of today, which is titled Addressing Labor Markets Shortages in an Aging Society. I would like now to call our keynote speaker in this session, Professor Maite Alguacil. Thank you very much for joining us from Spain. Professor Alguacil currently serves as a scientific advisor to the cabinet of Ms. Elma Saiz Delgado, Minister of Inclusion, Social Security and Migration, and she's also Professor of Economics at the University Jaume I. She's the head of the research group Camina, and her most recent research deals with aspects related to migratory movements, the location pattern of multinational firms and global value chains, making her an excellent guide, I believe, for facilitating our today's conversation. Professor Alguacil, the floor is yours.
to put, excuse me. Well, first of all, I would like to thank the organizers for the invitation, especially in this spot, such a nice place as it is. Chania, Chania. I don't know how to pronounce the city. Sorry. Okay, I'm pleased to be here today to share some reflections on findings of a topic that is increasingly urgent: how labor market shortages in aging society require us to make use of all available talent, including, of course, migration. This challenge means we need to change the way we think about migration policies. This is not only how to manage people movement, as usually we study in the academic, but to use strategies to support sustainable development and social cohesion. With this goal, we need to create strategies to align migrant talent with the real demands of the labor market. What I will going to present today is a part of a broader research project where we develop in our ministry the indicator of labor need, or in ELAT if we use the Spanish acronym. This tool is designed to identify the sectors with the greater labor shortages and therefore those with highest potential for integration of migrants into the labor market and also, of course, to the society. So now I'm going to move to the, first of all, I'm going to show you satellite facts, some facts that or key facts that, of course, all of you know mostly. Next, I'm going to present some papers that show how migration is an strategic can act on a strategic policy level. And finally, I will show you how we try to afford these policies, these migration policies that try to match migration with labor needs, showing you the indicator of labor market needs or INELAT. And I will finish with the concluding remarks. Well, as all here know, in the coming decades, labor markets in developed countries will face with significant change, and this can be grouped in four. Also, the fifth one it will be the climate change. Sorry, I didn't include here, but we can group all of that in four satellite facts or key facts. The first one is the one that we already know here. Population aging is transforming the composition of labor force. We know that as many people is retiring and a fewer young people is going into the labor market, and also the life expectancy is increasing, the average age of workers continues to rise. And this is nothing conjunctural, it's quite structural. We don't expect any reversion of this trend. So, for example, the newspaper The Economist said 2 weeks ago, almost everywhere in the rich world, native workforce are shrinking, with industries such as childcare, construction, and farming facing staff shortage. And one thing that is important to say is that worse may be to come. Well, if we focus on the Spanish case, projections of the National Institute of Statistics say that the percentage of population age 65 or over will peak around or more than 20% in the year 2055. So the dependency, a clear consequence of this is that the dependency ratio in this country will rise from 33 in 2022 to more than 64 in 54, nearly doubling. So it's difficult to think how to sustain the welfare system. So the question is no longer whether we will need more workers, but rather where they will come from and what skill they will bring with them. The second key fact I would like to highlight is the increasing, there is a typo, automatization and digitalization with adjustments in the skills demand. We find that the technological change is accelerating skills polarization. We find, for example, in the paper by Ferreiro, Seano, et al., for the Spanish case, that with the digitalization, there is a polarization of the demands of a skill, with an increase in the demand for highly skilled and low skilled jobs, but this is accompanied with a decline in medium skill occupations. So we have a polarization in skills and a new demand, for new skills. So we have, on the one hand, that population aging is increasing, and the demand for new skills complicate the renewal of the workers, a global issue with serious consequence for the economy. At the newspaper, and the highlight of the newspaper, El País, that is the main newspaper in Spain, said the last July. Well, the third fact I would like to point out is that the problem with the public opinion, with the anti-immigration feelings that appear in the European country, this public opinion about immigration remains quite skeptical. Rising trends in international migration is in opposite with the increasing hostility toward the growing migrant population. 7 in 10 European citizens overestimate the share of population born abroad in their economy. So, agents, we can say that the exaggerated perception and hostility toward migration contrast with demographic reality, fueling social tension that require for informed response and public policies focus on social cohesion. So it's a fact that permanent migration and also patterns of irregular migration is increasing in the recent years in OECD countries. The Spanish case I would like to mention is a special case, as in only 2 years, over 2 million migrants were regularized in my country. This data in 2025, 1 of 5 Spanish population has been brought abroad. And since 2022, more than 1,000 people has participated in circular migration programs that we call for the acronym HECO. Well, migration in Spain stands out as the key demographic lever to offset population decline, but not only in Spain, of course, in all European countries. Well, so migration appears, therefore, as a powerful lever when combined with proactive labor policies. When managed effectively, migration enables flexibility, productivity, and resilience, as says, for example, the paper of Holzer in 19. Evidence consistently shows that well-managed migration can foster growth, can foster innovation, and also improve the social cohesion. Migrants tend to fill key roles in both high-skilled and low-skilled sectors, helping to sustain essential economic function. Studies such as the one by Giovanni Peri highlight that economies combining temporary mobility with pathways to permanence achieve better outcomes in productivity, job stability, and social cohesion. Immigration should complement, not replace, domestic workforce activation and education strategies. And here I will show you a very simple graph from macroeconomics manual. We have that in this graph clearly we can see that the impact of migration on native works depend on the migrant workers as a complement or a substitute. In the left-hand side, we have a graph when migrant workers as a substitute have similar skills, so they compete with local workers. In that case, there is a pressure to reduce wages. However, When migrants act as a complement, that is, they complement a skill for native labor, we can appreciate that productivity and production increase, so both labor demand and labor supply increase, and there is no such a pressure in salaries as many decades ago. The Nobel Prize David Carr saw in the world about Meryl Barfield studied the impact of immigrants to Miami from Cuba. Well, and now I'm going to show you how in the Spanish government they command us to build an indicator of labor demand mix with the objective to identify economic sectors experiencing labor shortage. The objective already was assessing the national employment situation and promoting a more orderly, legal, and security migration process. We know that addressing labor shortage in aging society demands evidence-based migration policies. So, this indicator is an indicator that tries to integrate multiple dimensions, particularly labor shortages, aging, migration pattern, and employment into a single another type of composite indicator of labor market tension. We use in this group of experts to build this indicator. We use a methodology similar to the multidimensional quality of life indicator. This is a pioneering experience in the measure of labor market pressure, because we try to identify not only the actual situation of labor shortages in different sectors and regions, but also to forecast what is going to happen next. Well, the requirements for an indicator, on every indicator, and especially this labor needs indicator, is that we need to use an objective and replicable method and based on official sources data in order that anyone could replicate these results, and the information should be based on reliable data. Yes, we tried to build this indicator using the high level of detail. Specifically, we use the economics, activities, and occupation, 2 digits of the national classification of the economics activity. We are now working in doing in a more disaggregate way. We use in the construction of this indicator variables that try to capture both what is the actual situation, that is the weights of the variable, but also the dynamic trends, because as I mentioned, we try to forecast what is going to happen next. The data we use is the data that is available from 2018 to 2024, and is easily interpretable as any composite indicator. We get only a value that integrates, that combines the multiple dimensions that we try to gather in that value. So we can say that these indicators have a high analytical potential, as long as enables comparison across sectors, across regions, over time, and even if we extend to other countries, across countries. Well, just to show a little bit the methodology we use the adjusted Machota-Pareto index method, but because the method allows us to adjust for variability within the same dimension as in any composite index, as the Hamburg composite index mentioned. We follow the next steps. We select the dimension and the variables inside each dimension. We normalize the variables. In this case, the variables is going to take a value a minimum value of 70, that this is the low labor market tightness, and the highest value of 130, indicating the highest labor market tightness. This is when there is no a match between supply and demand of the labor in that sector or in that region. Well, we take also into account if there is a negative or a positive polarity. That's it, if the variable influence positively to the labor market tightness or negatively. And also we, according to the adjusted Mariota-Pareto methodology, we adjust for vertical variability. And once we have the INELAT, this indicator for each one dimension, we aggregate into a single value using the principal components analysis methods. We try to do this as transparent as possible, because once we determine which sectors are the ones that need more our migrants, there is a negotiation, with all the society, with all the society agents. Well, just to mention that the dimension we include in this INELAT are these four, as I already mentioned previously. We see what's happened with labor shortages in the different sectors and regions, what is happening with agents, with migration, because we know migrants usually go to the most dynamic economic sectors, as 90% of migrants comes to our country for a job. And also we look at data of unemployment, and labor force participation in the different sectors and regions. Very simple, I can mention some variables that we use for each one of the dimensions. As I already said to you, we aggregate or we combined all these variables for a single dimension using the principal components analysis. Once we have the INELAT for labor shortage, the INELAT for agency, the INELAT for migration, and the INELAT for employment and labor for participation, we use an average, a simple average, to get the INELAT. This indicator synthesizes all the information into a single measure of labor market tension. Well, also just to mention that as you can see, we use both dynamic variables and also weight variables. So to conclude, we can say that the real question is not whether societies will age, but how we would respond to that issue. The choice is between inertia and innovation. By integrating migration into long-term labor strategies, we can turn demographic change into an opportunity for safe prosperity and resilience. Migration alone cannot reverse demographic decline, but combined with labor assessment and efficient governance, it becomes a pillar of resilience and growth. Our INELAT offers an illustrative example of how data-driven tools can guide migration policy. It's a pioneering instrument designed to identify economic sectors and the labor stress. And the goal, as I mentioned, is shift from competition to complementarity, the migrants' labor force, and by linking migration management to empirical data, Spain moves from reactive policies to anticipatory planning. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much for this insightful presentation, Professor Alquacil. I would like now to welcome to the floor Dr. Cem Özgüzel. Dr. Özgüzel is an economist at the Crete Centre on Population Dynamics at the OECD, who will set the scene for our panel discussion. He holds a PhD in economics from the Paris School of Economics. Before joining the OECD, he was a teaching and research fellow at the University of Paris 1 Pantheon Sorbonne and a lecturer at Sciences Po. He has also been a visiting scholar at Harvard University and the German Institute for Employment Research. Jem, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Iris. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, those who are joining online and in person. My name is Cem Özgüzel. I'm an economist at the OECD's Crete Centre, and it's my pleasure to present to you some preliminary findings from an ongoing work on how international migration can alleviate labor shortages in Greece. This is a joint work with Vivian Kutsu-Yorgopoulou and Paul Yu, who are in the room. And this is work we're doing is as part of the program of work of OECD Crete Centre. I'll just do this. So, in a nutshell, this project has three main objectives. First of all, we want to understand the drivers of labor shortages and mismatches in Greece, which sectors they occur, which occupations are affected the most. Then, in a second step, we'd like to understand and empirically the role of international migration in addressing these labor shortages. Finally, we want to identify policy options. Well, in addition, not only relate to immigration policies, but also affecting or covering overall labor market to address these shortages and mismatches. Over the past years, we have seen a divergence in the labor market tightness in Greece. Here in this figure, you can see the trends of labor market tightness. And what is striking is that despite following similar trends in the last 10 years, since the pandemic, labor market tightness has increased dramatically in Greece. As you can see, while the labor market tightness have followed a parallel trend or change roughly remain unchanged in most of Europe, they have increased by tenfold in Greece. An OECD survey that was conducted by Global Forum of Productivity shows that 73% of the firms in Greece are affected by labor shortages. This number is quite high, but remains below the numbers that we see, or the average we see of in OECD, which is 80%. So what this matters, while it looks, or situation in Greece looks lower or better than OECD average, we see a quite high share of firms that are facing severe shortages, and that is quite important to consider. Yes. Right. And migrants remain an important source of labor supply in Greece. In 2023, roughly 1 in 10 people in Greece were foreign-born. So this number is, again, below the OECD average of 15%, but still remains quite high compared to many OECD countries. What is important to note is that during this period, while migrant share has increased in most of OECD countries, the share of migrants has stayed constant in Greece. While the number has not changed, the composition in terms of country of origins have changed dramatically. An important feature of migration in Greece is that it follows business cycles. So as you can see from here, migrants tend to come to Greece when the economy is expanding, but then they also leave when the economy shrinks. So during this period, while, as I mentioned, you look at 10-year time window, you see the share has not changed, but actually during this period there's been a drop in the migrant share, and then which has recovered later on. So this feature of close correlation or association with business cycle is important because this is a bit stronger. This relationship is stronger compared to other OECD countries where migration tends to be a bit more stable and is less affected by the fluctuation in the business cycle. And we also see this relationship also in the profiles of the migrants. Migrants in Greece are more likely to be male, of working age. And this indicates that the profiles of the migrants in this country are therefore to work. Overall, migrants in Greece have lower formal education, levels of education. So around 20% of migrants in Greece have a tertiary education, that is university and above. This is lower than the 36% we see for native-born. Such gaps between native and foreign-born is common also in other OECD countries, but the gap is slightly larger in the context of Greece. So this suggests that there's something to understand in the profiles or why Greece is struggling to attract highly educated migrants. Naturally, migrants in Greece are concentrated in lower skilled occupations. So around 6 in 10 migrants work in occupations that require lower levels of education, such as elementary occupations, crafts, services, or sales. This is much higher than what we see for native-born. Again, this concentration in lower skilled occupations is also common in other OECD countries, but again, the concentrations tends to be a bit stronger in the context of Greece. An important aspect or an important finding we have is that there seems to be the share of migrants tends to be lower in sectors that are facing lower shortages, while their share tends to be lower in sectors facing shortages. Of course, this does not indicate any causation, it's pure descriptive, but this could suggest that maybe it's not about the number of migrants in the country, but it's more about their allocation across sectors and better use of their skills that deserves a focus or understanding. An issue that we see in Greece, which we also see in OECD countries, is that migrants work in jobs that are below their formal education levels. In fact, 45% of foreign-born or the migrants in Greece work in jobs that are below their formal education levels. This is again higher. I mean, we see similar misqualification or overqualification for native-born, but as you can see from the figure, the gap is quite high in the context of Greece, and this suggests that the skills of migrants are not fully used, and there are, of course, many reasons why this is the case. So, to sum up, shortages are increasing in Greece, although their levels remain lower than the OECD average. Migrants already support key sectors, such as construction and tourism, but many work in jobs below their qualifications. So integration gaps also exist, which we will discuss more in the panel. And this is quite important for maximizing the untapped potential that the migrants present. And looking ahead, priorities should include improving job matching through training or supporting reskilling, boosting participation of underrepresented groups, and faster recognition, that is through faster recognition of foreign qualifications, and better using migrant talents to address labor shortages. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sam, for setting the stage for a very engaging, I believe, conversation. We are now going to watch a pre-recorded message of Ms. Evi Volodaki, the Deputy Minister of Migration and Asylum in Greece. She's going to present the Greek experience on utilizing migration to address labor market shortages.
Κυρίες και κύριοι, η Ελλάδα προσεγγίζει τη δημογραφική αλλαγή με ρεαλισμό, σχέδιο και αισιοδοξία. Βέβαια, σε καμία περίπτωση δεν πρέπει να συσχετίζουμε το δημογραφικό πρόβλημα με τη μετανάστευση. Οι αλλαγές στο νομοθετικό πλαίσιο που αφορούν στην νόμιμη μετανάστευση συνδέουν τις ανάγκες σε εργατικό δυναμικό με τις ανάγκες της οικονομίας. Η νόμιμη μετανάστευση είναι για τη χώρα μας ένας σύγχρονος και δημιουργικός μοχλός πολιτικής. Στηρίζει την παραγωγή, ενισχύει την απασχόληση και προσφέρει ευκαιρίες σε ανθρώπους που θέλουν να συμβάλλουν και να ξεκινήσουν μια νέα ζωή. Η ελληνική οικονομία εξελίσσεται. Τομείς όπως ο τουρισμός, η γεωργία, οι κατασκευές, η φροντίδα και η εστίαση έχουν αυξανόμενη ανάγκη από ανθρώπινο δυναμικό. Γι' αυτόν τον λόγο συνδέουμε τη μεταναστευτική πολιτική με τις ανάγκες της αγοράς εργασίας για μια οικονομία πιο ανθεκτική. Αναπτύσσουμε ένα νέο ευέλικτο πλαίσιο για την νόμιμη μετανάστευση, με μηχανισμούς που καταγράφουν τις πραγματικές ανάγκες της αγοράς, με διαδικασίες πιο απλές και διαφανείς και με προγράμματα εκπαίδευσης και κατάρτισης που προετοιμάζουν τους ανθρώπους για να ενταχθούν ομαλά στην αγορά εργασίας. Ήδη μέσα από νέες πρωτοβουλίες δημιουργούμε γέφυρες ανάμεσα στην κοινωνική ένταξη και την παραγωγική δραστηριότητα. Νέοι άνθρωποι αποκτούν εκπαίδευση, επαγγελματική κατάρτιση και τη δυνατότητα να εργαστούν. Γιατί η ένταξη στην αγορά εργασίας και όχι η επιδοματική πολιτική είναι ο πυρήνας της στρατηγικής μας. Μέσα από την εργασία καλλιεργείται εμπιστοσύνη και αναπτύσσονται δεξιότητες. Ιδιαίτερη βαρύτητα δίνουμε στη συνεργασία με τον ιδιωτικό και τον κοινωνικό τομέα. Παράλληλα, δίνουμε έμφαση στη δημιουργία δομών προένταξης που συνδυάζουν φιλοξενία, εκπαίδευση και ελληνομάθεια. Δεν θέλουμε ανθρώπους σε αναμονή, αλλά ανθρώπους που αποκτούν δεξιότητες. Μέσα από αυτή τη συνεργασία και με τη στήριξη της κοινωνίας των πολιτών προωθείται η επαγγελματική ένταξη νέων ανθρώπων μέσα από την εκπαίδευση, την κατάρτιση και την εργασία. Είναι μια πρωτοβουλία που ενώνει την κοινωνική πολιτική με την περιφερειακή ανάπτυξη και δείχνει τι μπορούμε να πετύχουμε όταν δουλεύουμε μαζί. Αυτή η πολιτική βασίζεται σε πραγματικά δεδομένα και στις ανάγκες της αγοράς εργασίας. Μέσα από προγράμματα όπως για παράδειγμα το Bridging the Skills Gap ενισχύουμε την κατάρτιση και τη βιώσιμη απασχόληση, δίνοντας σε κάθε άνθρωπο τη δυνατότητα να σταθεί με αξιοπρέπεια και προοπτική. Το στίχημα για το μέλλον είναι να καλύψουμε τις ανάγκες σε εργατικό δυναμικό και να δημιουργήσουμε αγορές εργασίας οι οποίες να είναι ανθεκτικές και ευέλικτες. Αυτό σημαίνει επένδυση στην εκπαίδευση και στην κατάρτιση με τη συμμετοχή όλων. Σημαίνει συνεργασία κράτους, επιχειρήσεων και κοινωνίας των πολιτών για ένα μοντέλο ανάπτυξης που θα αξιοποιεί κάθε διαθέσιμη δεξιότητα και θα δίνει προοπτική σε κάθε άνθρωπο. Η Ελλάδα συμμετέχει ενεργά στη διαμόρφωση αυτής της κοινής ευρωπαϊκής στρατηγικής. Μια στρατηγικής που βασίζεται στη συνεργασία, στην κοινωνική ισορροπία, αλλά και στην αμοιβαία πρόοδο. Σας ευχαριστώ πολύ.
Now we could proceed with our panelists, and I invite all of you to come to the stage. Professor Alguacil, Mr. Dr. Osguzel, Dr. Lisa Anderson, and Alessandra Venturini online. I would like now to introduce the rest of our panelists. Dr. Lisa Anderson, thank you very much for joining us from Paris. Lisa is a labor market economist, policy analyst in the OECD International Migration Division. Lisa has 15 years of experience leading research projects and conducting policy analysis related to international migration. Her current work focuses on attracting talent, international student mobility, diaspora engagement. Prior to joining the OECD, she was a researcher at the United Nations University Merit in Maastricht, and Lisa holds a PhD in development economics from the University of Gothenburg and an MSc in economics from Uppsala University. Professor Alessandra Venturini, thank you very much for joining us from Torino, Italy. Alessandra is professor of economics at the University of Torino, where she holds the Salmoner Chair in European Migration Studies, and she is the director of the Interdisciplinary Diploma in Migration Studies. She is a European Commission expert on migration and she's a co-chair of the G20 Migration Task Force. Her main research interests are the migration choice and its impact on the innovation process of the destination country, the integration of foreigners in the labor market, and the supporting role of cultural consumption. Dear panelists, before we start our discussion, allow me to share a few thoughts on the topic. It's unanimously recognized that population aging has a profound impact on workforce size, posing significant threats to the smooth operation of the future labor markets, as it can bring about severe shortages across most industrial and service sectors. The numbers clearly illustrate the demographic situation. The old age dependency ratio is projected to rise from 32 in the year 2024 to 50 by 2060, placing unprecedented pressure on our labor markets and consequently on our economies at large. Without decisive action, the shrinking employment to population ratios could cause a decline of 8% in GDP per capita by the year 2050 with respect to 2021. The impact is more pronounced in countries like Greece, where the more adverse demographic projections could cause a decline by 15% in GDP per capita over the same period. With this adverse projection in mind, the aim of our panel is to explore how the economies can respond to the emerging pressing labor shortages. OECD studies have shown that fully leveraging the skills and talents of all individuals in the society is essential to offset the influence of shrinking workforces so to sustain growth. The countries need to formulate well-informed short and long-term strategies. We want our discussions to illustrate examples and best practices from different countries, elaborating in their strengths and weaknesses and enlightening us on their effectiveness. How we could tap labor potential of groups which are currently underrepresented in the labor market, such as women, immigrants, youth, and individuals above 50 years old. We are aware that targeting each of these groups requires appropriate policies, which is never an easy endeavor. Such policies require us rethink how we design labor markets that are resilient and inclusive. With these thoughts, I stop here. With these thoughts in mind, let us start our panel discussion. And I start with Lisa. I won't follow the order of the way that we are sitting. Lisa, my first question, then there's going to be a second question, 2 rounds. How are OECD countries adapting their labor migration policies in response to aging populations and persistent labor shortages across key sectors? What strategies have OECD countries introduced to attract and retain migrant workers?
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure being here discussing these very important topics. I think so. I will touch upon and follow up a little bit on both the presentation on setting the scene and also the project on Greece, but maybe broadening the perspective a bit to talk about what we see in terms of both direct and indirect impacts of migration on population and growth, and specifically the contribution on the labor markets, and also what you were asking here, how OECD countries are responding and adapting their labor migration systems and labor migration policies. So we already heard in the introductory presentations here that labor migration can play an important role in filling labor and skills gaps in OECD countries. We see both direct and indirect effects here, direct effects on expanding the labor force through labor migration, but also through other channels. We also see family migration or humanitarian migration also obviously serving this purpose in the longer run if the integration measures are there to for these migrants to also be able to enter into the labor market. We see both an increase in migration, as was mentioned in the overall into the OECD countries. We've also seen an increase in the share of highly skilled migrants. So migrants are contributing to the labor force, but more and more so also to the highly skilled segment of the labor force. Today, there are about 40 million tertiary educated foreign-born individuals in OECD countries, and this is also this share is growing, as I said, and we see this also as a result, partly as a result of policies today focusing a lot on attracting highly skilled migrants. We also see migrants filling gaps in specific sectors. Here we can talk about the medical sector, doctors and nurses, but also the long-term care sector, which will also matter a lot in the future with the aging population that we're talking about. So in our recent outlook, the International Migration Outlook, we have a specific chapter looking at the number of foreign doctors and nurses in OECD countries, and the development in the past 2 decades has been very impressive. So the share of doctors and nurses, foreign-born doctors and nurses, have grown by about 7 percentage points, and this represents an increase in foreign-born doctors by 86%. And the number of foreign doctors and the number of nurses grew by 136% over the last 20 years. So this is, if we take Greece for an example, we see both inflows and outflows of doctors here. So Greece there is about 10,000 Greek-born doctors working in other OECD countries now, but at the same time, there's also about 5,000 foreign-born doctors working in Greece now. So this is just an example of the flows that we see here going both in and out of OECD countries. But it's also maybe an illustrative example of how this development is not going to be sustainable over a longer period of time, especially if we continue to recruit doctors and nurses from low and middle income countries. We also need to think about the consequences in origin countries. And I think this is something of a lesson across also, and also what we heard in the first presentation about the political aspect here also. We know that it's also not sustainable to think that we can increase migration and use this as a solution. Also from the political perspective, this is not going to be feasible. So what we need to turn to is obviously also then to look at mobilizing and invest in those that are already here. So as Sam was mentioning, we need to look into the integration aspects. We need to look into overqualification. We know that this is a problem across pretty much all OECD countries. Migrants are coming and many of them are highly skilled, but they're not necessarily doing the jobs that they are trained for. So more investments in this will also lead to better outcomes and better use of the migrants. I also mentioned indirect effects. We have also looked at this in our 2023 International Migration Outlook. We also had 2 specialized chapters on fertility and migration. We see that with the decreasing fertility in OECD countries, migrants are actually contributing to increasing the fertility rates in that regard, since migrants are often young when they arrive, and we also have a lot of family migration, which is often the case that family formation happens after arrival. So indirectly, migration is also contributing to increasing our now low fertility rates in OECD countries. So all in all, this shows that migration can play a role, even though we cannot rely completely on migration to solve the demographic challenges. But I wanted then to turn to what role for policy here to improve the outcomes for migrants, and also thinking about how we're selecting migrants, and tying on to the first presentation. So what we see, I mean, first, there's no one model in the OECD in terms of labor migration systems. Every country has a unique context and also have a unique system. But we do see some common trends and also approaches in how to admitting labor migrants. Overall, we have sort of two broad approaches when it comes to admitting migrants. One is a focus on human capital. So this would be the example of Canada's express entry system, for example, where you have a point-based system. You decide what characteristics are desirable in migrants, and then you select migrants based on this. The other approach is more of a demand-driven migration, which responds to often more short-term labor shortages in the economy, and labor migrants are admitted to meet needs in specific sectors. And here, specific sectors, I mean, I already mentioned medical sectors, but also we see this a lot in the agriculture sector, hospitality, care sector, etc. And this is a way with these systems, obviously you have they're more flexible in meeting short-term shortages, while as the human capital approach is more tailored to meeting long-term labor market outcomes, and also stimulate career mobility and permanent residency. But most countries in OECD does not have one or the other, but often a combination of these different models. But I think these are important to keep in mind when thinking about designing policies that can meet both current and future labor demands. And I think also across both these models, no matter which approach you have as a baseline, I think that integration is more and more becoming a pressing issue in both models. As we mentioned before, it's not just about admitting migrants, but it's also about making use of their skills. And I think I wanted to talk about exactly what we heard in the Spanish case. Also here, what we see a bit of a trend across OECD countries now is more systematic labor market needs assessments built into the labor markets, labor migration systems. So these, we're talking about systems that are aiming to be more forward-looking and able to address structural labor market needs rather than responding to short-term needs. So this means more data-driven, exactly what we heard what Spain is doing here. So including taking into labor market projections and forecasting, but also vacancy data, skills assessments, and some countries are also moving to having more of employer consultations in this process. We see a trend towards an expansion of shortage occupation lists, that countries are coming up with a list of shortage occupations where labor where they want to focus their labor migration. Where they want to focus on admitting labor markets to these sectors, and more use of this data-driven approaches in this, but also an increased focus in thinking about retention. So we also know, and this applies specifically to the highly skilled, it's they might come, but if they don't stay, it's a lot of efforts invested in something that it's only short term. So there's more also thinking about how to retain people once they are in the country. And I think finally, another trend we see is linking migration pathways with training systems. So this could mean, for example, even before migrants are moving, introduce some training programs or prepare migrants for the the training and the skills that they need in the destination countries. This could happen, as I said, even before migration or at arrival. We see a lot of efforts in this. In Japan, for example, is investing a lot in skilled labor migration now, and heavily invested also in their training systems and adapting training systems. There's also this use of skills mobility partnerships or talent partnerships, called differently in different contexts, where you're focusing not only on skills development for the destination country, but also paying attention to what is happening in the origin countries, and that there should be skills development also in the origin country, meaning that you're training people in the origin country. Some of them will move, but some of them will not move but stay and contribute to the labor markets in the origin countries. There's much more to say here, but I will stop for now. You mentioned a second round, so this will be my contribution for now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Lisa. Now I have a question for Jem. Jem, in aging societies, how significant are the employment barriers faced by women and other underrepresented groups compared with the aging itself in driving labor shortages? Which policy levers would unlock their contribution for most effectively, such as childcare and elder care capacity, flexible work, etc.?
Yeah, thank you. Is it work? Yes. Yeah, aging is it explains the shortages, but it doesn't explain everything. So one thing that we have discussed also yesterday is the low employment and participation of women. This is a major constraint that OECD countries face in terms of in terms of labor shortages, and this can actually be an important way to boost or at least alleviate the shortage, the pressure that we're seeing from aging societies and decline in the working population. So let me give you a few numbers. So in Greece, 60% of native-born women are working, actually currently employed, and this number is only 50% for foreign-born. If you compare those two males, we see 80% for both native-born and foreign-born men. So this suggests that there's already an untapped potential in the labor force that can come from by boosting the participation of women, both native-born and migrant. And you could be thinking maybe the numbers are also similar in the rest of the OECD countries, but it's not. We see, of course, in all OECD countries a certain amount of employment gap by gender, by sex, but this gap is much smaller. So for me, one of the key ways or solutions in the context of Greece to address labor shortages by increasing the labor supply is through supporting women. And in addition, and you might be thinking maybe women don't want to work. I mean, the employment rate reflects the desire to participate, but that is not actually true. When we look at unemployment rates, we also see that, we can also see it in unemployment rates, because for native-born men, the rate native-born and foreign-born men, unemployment rate is around 5%. If you look at women, it's 12%. And again, this is a very significant gap that suggests that women are looking for a job, but they just can't find any. And again, this gap is very dramatic or much larger compared to other OECD countries. So that means it is not a structural pattern that we cannot break. It is something context specific that could be addressed through policies. Overall, we see that women in Greece are active in healthcare and education, but much less so in sectors that are facing shortages. So maybe by increasing the employment and also guiding directing this increased labor force to these places, to these sectors, this could also alleviate some of the pressures that some sectors are facing. So again, as you mentioned in your question, there are important problems or important barriers to female employment. So in general, we tend to see the childcare or rigid work schedules are major obstacles, because that they do not allow women to balance work and life requirements. In that sense, working on these, like expanding affordable childcare or elder care in some of the countries is an important way of, again, lifting those barriers and encouraging participation. Again, when it comes to the migrant women, of course, the foreign qualifications are an important obstacle, and ensuring that these degrees could be recognized easily, that could boost participation. Similarly, policies that aim to address or change or adjust the visa policies, visa options, are also important, because in some OECD countries we observe that when families come together, while men have access to labor markets, women or their dependents do not. So making sure that these visas offer this possibility for women is also quite crucial. And of course, all these policies should be handled together. It's a cohesive system. You need to make sure that there's labor parts are taken care of, social parts, educational part. They all need to be coordinated across all levels of the governance. So in a nutshell, I mean, aging is important, and it is reducing the working age number of people who are of working age, but the participation gaps that we see in Greece they're amplifying these shortages, and higher female participation for both native-born and foreign-born could really offset much of the demographic decline. Yesterday, there were some numbers given about this. So, and we have seen it in other OECD countries where inclusive labor market policies have stabilized employment despite aging. So there is potential. There are good examples, and there's a lot of room for improvement in the case of Greece. So I think the policy should be aiming try to be more inclusive to offset some of the decline in the working age.
Okay, thank you very much. Now I turn to Professor Venturini. Hello once again. Alessandra, given the growing evidence, this is my first question, the growing evidence of sector-specific labor shortages, what policies would best address this challenge in your view? Should efforts primarily focus on migration policy, which is your specialty, and active labor market policies, or a more integrated approach is required, also encompassing education, training, and social protection systems? It's a broad question. Oh, we can't hear you. Perhaps you have to press the...
Yes, now you can hear me?
Yeah, great.
Thank you very much. I'm very sorry not being Crete with you, especially to have not the possibility to know the Delphi Institute that I read so much, many papers and so on, but it will be for another time. Okay, I would like to take some point of Werner and Lisa, put them in a different structure. Migration policy. Migration policy has fundamentally 4 channels of entrance and 4 legislation fundamentally. You can enter by family members, and the family member that in a certain way women in general, Werner was mentioning before, are the large majority. The channel representing Euro 40% of the stock of migrants. After you can enter for work, you can enter as student, and you can enter as a person in search of international protection, asylum seekers. The newspaper, the public opinion, they only speak of asylum seekers, which are only 10% of the total stock of migrants. In few countries, Germany and Spain, they are 20% of the stock of migrants. They are a minority. In addition, more than 50% of them don't get the international protection because they're not their rights to get it. But they stay 1 year in reception center without working, without teaching, without education, without possibility of finding a job. So being not receiving the status, the best thing is fundamentally they are illegal migrants. When we had regularization in legal migration, everything was working very well in Italy. Now, with this formal legislation, the problem would be to revise the migration policy. We should open as a humanitarian corridor for people in need of international protection, which arrive already with the rights of asylee. And we have to open more the door for labor. Following what already Lisa was suggesting, also organizing a proactive migration policy. This is the only way. Migration should be managed in a proactive way, in which you organize with the German style, in the country of origin, training center in which you select migrants for the need of the labor market. It's not nice to say, but this will be the solution. Train them, teach them the language and the culture of the destination country, and bring them with the job and with the right to enter in the country of destination. It's not nice to say, because now it's very trendy to say migrants should come. Should come, but when they arrive, they stay 1 year in a reception center, you change your mind. In Italy, we now apply the law 50. The name of the law has this number. And in this way, you make also the employer more responsible for the migrant, because they call them, they grant the work, and they care also of the integration with the employer association. Because the integration in the labor market and in the society is the future of migration, given that the native will shrink, so they should become, not as say citizens, but knowledgeable of the culture of the country of this destination. Because integration is crucial, because if you look at the labor market, migrants are, with the exception of the one that Lisa was mentioning, the highly skilled, the doctor and so on, the other are in general in low-skilled job, or let us say they are in job in which they are enabled to use their hard skill. They have hard skill, but given they don't know the language, don't know the soft skill, they remain stuck in this job. And the family members are even worse than all the other. They have the lowest participation in the employment. The number that Werner was mentioning is increase of more of family members than women migrating, because in Europe in general, Romanian, Polish women, Albanian women, they're all employed, but other nationalities that suffer of this. So I go to the second point, integration. Integration was banned for a long time, because social scientists, they were saying that assimilation was absolutely a word that you couldn't use. Sometimes economists, you see, are less sophisticated. They use assimilation in place of integration or inclusion, and they are absolutely cut off, because you cannot use assimilation. Because assimilation was what French used after the war. So the migrants should become French citizens, they come from French colony. We don't even do any integration policy, because they should learn, become like the French. This doesn't work. But for that reason, for a long time, there was the idea that only the native should learn the culture of the country of origin. This is a very good idea, and this is for sure important, but you can understand, practically speaking, migrants are 10% of the population. They belong in general to 25 nationalities. You can imagine the majority, the 90% of the population being knowledgeable of the main principle of the culture of this 10%. It's unfeasible. Some of them, they know someone. So the first, if you want to help them, you have to try to what is called the acculturation, to make them closer to the knowledgeable of the culture of the destination country. We have done a lot of empirical work from below, myself, Strom, in which we use linguistic list and cultural list as a proxy to see and you see immediately the one with the closest culture, let us say Romanian in Italy, Albanian because they know Italian, they know the culture, are much easily integrated. But linguistics and culture are a fixed variable. So they, like religions, they are not a variable in which you can invest. Instead, Barry, the idea of culturation, behavioral culturation, is very important, but a culture is difficult to teach. They need emotion. And instead, we have done research that getting closer to the cultural destination through the consumption of cultural good is a good policy strategy and favor the inclusion, let us say. The last point that I want to stress are the actors. I like very much yesterday that Joanna was saying with lifelong learning has failed. I would like to encourage her. Not lifelong learning, the management of lifelong learning. So you know to think of the actor, what they do. Firms are the first. You have to involve not the single firm, the association of the entrepreneur, they are the key driver of recruitment and so on. But inside the firm, you have the human resource manager. I teach also a course, in addition to migration in Europe, a course of human resource management. And I invite a lot of director of human resources. Are not updated, they're not open. So I think that entrepreneurs should work, and also the school, the person that train human research manager could help them to adjust to the aging population, because the long life learning is the future. I remain at university because I have young people that teach me and I have the assistants all the time. You have to be in place where you can update, even if your human capital is aging. But last and not least, trade unions. If you know that yesterday a colleague was saying that in Switzerland, I don't know if Joanna or the other ladies will say that in Norway trade unions is active and so on. Trade union, instead of favoring, going together, is trying to restrain because their human capital is very low. Government policy, of course, as is always mentioned, the OECD report, the one on migration, on employment, on aging, stress very much the policy. But job placing policy, job placing agency, they're very weak. In Italy, don't work for the Italian, why they should work for foreigner? You see, the problem is the institution has to change. And so job matching agents and so on. But the last, which is for me, from my point of view, very crucial, is the third sector. Do you know all the associations that care about the migrant, the integration, and so on? Are made by volunteer. I always want, if the objective of the association is to help all these retired persons that want a mission of their life, or to really what they are designed for, teaching Italian to foreigner, teaching association and so on. These people has to be trained. I think retired people want a mission many times more than a job. And if we are able in the company to provide them of training, but also all the association need training. Otherwise, instead of helping to support migrants, knowledge of language training, they are only a support for retired people, which could be not bad, but it's not their mission. This is all for the moment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alessandra. Now, to Maite. How can policy simultaneously address the immediate shortage of labor and the long-term labor market needs arising from population aging? Straightforward question.
Okay, first of all, thank you for the invitation to this interesting panel. It's a pleasure for me to be here, and I want to say with you how Spain, the government of Spain is addressing both the immediate shortages of labor and the long-term challenges that come from population agency and the reduction of native population. Well, the government of Spain faced this from a dual perspective. On the one side, attending to today's urgent labor market needs, and on the other side, preparing the country for the future. Just let me tell you a few words about the migration phenomenon in Spain, or just to put in context. Spain was traditionally an immigrant country, so our immigration actually is only from mainly from this century. But now we are, I think, the third country with most foreign population. The 20% of population in our country, 1 to 5, is foreign native people. And we have one of the lowest fertility rate in the world, 1.16. So, but paradoxically, our population is growing. Last year, we were more Spanish than ever. We can say for in this way that migration in Spain is essential for this demographic growth and also for the economic sustainability. Today, as I told you, more than 7.3 million people born abroad. This population is also concentrates in more groups, labor active groups, and reproductive age groups. Without migrants, Spain will face a major population imbalance, putting economic growth and the welfare system at risk. So they help us to keep our population younger, support key industries, and contribute to make pension systems sustainable in the long run. Just recognizing this structural contribution of migrants, recognizing this, Spain has made migration and state policy based on 3 pillars: regularity, planning, and integration. A key milestone was the reform of immigration regulation, what we call Reglamento de Extranjería. Recently has been reformed, this immigration regulation in May of 2025, just recently. And this reform brought with important structural transformation. On the one hand, that is now simplified quite a lot administrative procedures and significantly reduced processing times to regulation, facilitate access to migrants for to training and employment, and the most important thing is that open new pathways from both labor and family inclusion. This regulation recognizes the figure of arraigo. Arraigo is like root, is a path to regularization for people already living illegally in Spain, but who are already integrated into the society. So we recognize family roots, we recognize social roots, labor roots, training roots, for example, for individuals who can demonstrate our relations in Spain, even if we are irregular, or that lives integrated in Spanish society 2 years. People enrolled in official training programs, they can access to the regularization through this figure of the arraigo. So since the 2022 that we recognize this figure, around 100,000 people have been regularized, people that was already living in Spain, I should say that, through this arraigo mechanism. So regulation is not only an economic policy for the future, is an act of justice. These people was living in our countries. So in the short term, Spain has also some interesting policy mechanisms. We have reformed safe and regular Chania for labor mobility to respond to sectors that are facing to several labor shortages, such as construction, agriculture, and transportation. These are essential sectors for the competitivity of the entire economy and for maintaining activities in regions seriously affected by population decline. Our flagship instrument is the collective management of hiring in origin, what we call HECO for the acronym for the Spanish words. This is a bilateral policy tool that enables the direct requirement of foreign workers from the countries of origin. In recent years, we have signed memorandums with countries like Senegal, Gambia, Mauritania, and more recently in 2025, really recently, with Paraguay. Yes, but Spain is also leading innovative programs that promote circular and gender-responsive migration. A very nice initiative is the key initiative that is called Guafira Program. Women, that the acronym is more or less women as, no, more or less is the acronym of women as financially independent rural actors. This is a co-finance program by the European Commission and led by the State Secretary of Migration of the Ministry of Inclusion, Social Security and Migration. There is a second part of this program, the Guafira, the second, that will reinforce the economy autonomy of about 3,000 Moroccan women workers. The program also is involving other countries like Portugal, Mauritania, and Cape Verde. Another example of this kind of program is Driving X, developing cooperation with the International Organization for Migration, with the Spanish transport company that they need drivers, and with Moroccan institutions. This program addresses the shortage of qualified drivers in Spain through the combination of technical and languages training, job placement, and wide support. Yes, but beyond the previous bilateral projects, Spain is engaging in global cooperation to align skills and labor mobility. Together with the World Bank, we are working on the initiative reinforcing global skill partnership and regular circular migration between Latin America and Spain. This project connects Spain with Colombia, Ecuador, and the Dominican Republic to develop and evaluate global skill partnership, facilitating training and mobility that benefit both origin and destination countries. The second phase, launching soon, will implement pilot projects under this framework. Similarly, with the Inter-American Development Bank, we are preparing a project on circular migration between Spain and the countries of the Northern Triangle of Central America, Honduras, Guatemala, and El Salvador. Of course, as you can imagine, the main origin of migration to Spain is Latin America, probably because our roots, our colony past, and our similar languages. Although Morocco, in the north of Africa, remains the single largest countries of origin. But almost half of the foreign-born population in Spain, as I say, comes from Latin America, reflecting deep historical, linguistic, and cultural ties. And these connections greatly facilitate integration and social cohesion. I should say that there is not any single, to say that is too strong, but people from Latin America is practically fully integrated in the Spanish society. Even people from the extreme right parties accept these migrants. They complain about migrants from the north of Africa, but not from Latin America, probably about the color of the skin, I don't know. But it's quite easy for Latin American people to be integrated in the Spanish society, and also for the Spanish society to accept this kind of migration. Yes, so they represent all the migrants, not the Latin American, a valuable asset that the Spanish seat reinforce. Well, in conclusion, Spanish experience showed that addressing labor shortages and preparing for population aging are not competing goals. They are two sides of the same coin. By designing migration policies that are regular, planned, and of course, rights-based, we can meet today's economic needs while laying the foundation for a more sustainable and inclusive future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Maite. We enter in the very quick second round because we ran out of time. So I had in mind to ask again, Maite, but since you, in your first question, I think you have included everything. Just a simple question: what lessons can be drawn from the Spain experience? Just very, briefly, if we can learn something as lesson drawing process.
There's a festival to recognize that migration are non-active. We need it. There is not a solution for all of our problems, but they can mitigate the problem. Is also an issue of human rights and recognizing that people that are already in the country, those that are illegally, they are our people already. So we need to prepare to accept that, to introduce to our society, to learn from there culturally. Also, it's a two-way. It's a two-way aspect. And also, it's important, as I said in my last presentation, to identify those sectors where they are need the most, because it's easily to integrate, it's easily to access. I should say, when the society, the native society, recognize that they are needed, it's really, really much easier to integrate in the society. An example of that was in Valencia. I live in Valencia. We have a disaster with the Dana, and we need migrants to recover the area. So the Spanish government approved a special regulation channel to those people, and the Valencia society thought that they were needed, so they accept, they integrate. So as long as we consider that migrants are needed in our society and we inform people of that, they will be easier integrated into the society. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now I am going to do the following. I will ask the same question to Lisa Anderson and Alessandra Venturini. And of course, you can do the follow-up of your first question. So the common question is how countries, it's a general question, so you can respond the way that you prefer, how countries design forward-looking labor market and migration strategies. So we're interested more on the policy making here at this stage, at this stage of the conversation, that not only address current challenges, but also strengthen the resilience for the future demographic changes. Yeah, please.
Thank you. I will keep it short because we already touched upon this quite a bit. What I already mentioned in the first round about, more data-driven approaches involving the employers, but also retention. I think what I said there also, making use of the people that are already here, strengthening integration, thinking about also. Not in all cases. There are also cases where we see circularity maybe being the optimal way of organizing your migration pathways, but in also thinking about the long-term integration for those migrants where this makes sense. One thing that we have not touched so much upon is also thinking about mobilizing all types of migrants. And here I'm thinking also about international students. This has been an increasing interest from countries now to retain international students. This is already a group that is pre-integrated by having a degree from the destination country. They've spent years in the country already. They might speak the language depending on the country context. So also focusing on this group, making sure that they can transition into the labor market if they're interested in staying. And finally, the the immigrants, so the native-born population that is leaving the country. I think Greece is an excellent example here. There's been huge waves of immigration, so looking at attracting back also your own population in other countries is important in order to think about how migration can meet skills shortages. So we do have a project on this in the Greece context that will come out next year, looking at what Greece is doing now, as we heard yesterday, about trying to attract back the population. And so we will maybe present a bit more on that next year, the next year's conference. Thank you.
Sure, that's a good idea. Okay. Alessandra, what do you think about it?
Thank you very much. I think it's very difficult to learn something from the Spanish case. They're very lucky because they have former colonies where people speak Spanish, they're Catholic, they have the same background, same food, and so on, which even come as asylum seekers. So the door that you cannot close. And if you ask to the German, who has 800,000 Syrians, the difficulty in integrating migrant asylum that come from needy situation but different religion and so on. So I think that Spain is really very lucky. However, we are also should be have flexible project. I think that the policy should be flexible. Lisa said rightly, student native migrant that are abroad should come back, but also we have two big changes in our labor market. One is artificial intelligence. The OECD organized 2 weeks ago a conference on the issue with Scarpetta and so on. And artificial intelligence will change the jobs in the labor market. I wonder if in the future some of the caring work for old people or the company could be done by in a different way. And also, so the project should be the policy should be flexible with very short time revision and caring about intercultural integration because we're not all as lucky as the Spanish one.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, Jem, I had another question for you, but perhaps it's good to respond to the same question based on we heard about the Spanish approach and the different from other countries based on the research we're doing now on Greece, how you respond to this with regards to the policy design, the policy design.
So, an important issue that we noticed in the context of Greece is about male participation in the labor force. So, I mentioned earlier that we see high employment rates for men, migrant men, but one aspect that we often overlook is whether they like to work more or not. So, in fact, 12% of migrant men declare that they are underemployed, meaning they would like to work longer hours, or they believe that they could earn more. So this is important because this suggests that there are all these people who are working in either because they are working seasonally, that means they cannot work as much as they want, or they work in sectors that do not, or occupations that do not match their skill levels. These people have technical skill, vocational skills that could all be used. So in other words, the challenge is not only about job quantities, but it's also about job quality that people have. And this could also improve shortages, but also the matching quality. So we mentioned, throughout these last 2 days, we mentioned many policy tools that could be used to address these issues. But, the policies that could help them, recognize their skill sets or give them mobility across sectors, across places, seem to be the most important ones. So overall, what I would like to emphasize, close with this in this panel, is that there are already people in the labor force, but their skills are not really well used. If men's skills are fully used and the female participation to labor force can be increased, yes, then labor market becomes stronger and more resilient to aging and skill shortages.
Okay, thank you very much. With those insights in mind, I think it's worth doing it now to open the floor for questions or comments if they exist. If someone wants to. Okay, then, so we can close this session. Thank you very much. And the next session, now we have a coffee break, and we thank you very much, Alessandra.
No, thank you very much for you, for the chair.
What exactly is the...
And I don't know where you are, in which country?
So, welcome everyone to this final roundtable discussion, this closing panel in 2 days of very productive discussions. Our panel today is entitled Policy Solutions for Demographic Transition Challenges. We have heard a lot about, and I will welcome our participants and speakers after introducing the panel more broadly. We have well understood that in our times of demographic transition, we live longer lives. That's a good thing, especially compared to the alternative. But longer life expectancy comes with slowing or shrinking working age populations. And this is a challenge of multiple socioeconomic implications, and a challenge that calls for a wide range of coordinated policy instruments and institutions in order to address it. Of course, it is important to coordinate these policies towards a direction of remaining both healthy and productive in our aging societies, and to coordinate it in a holistic approach that will be able to integrate all different aspects and departments of government policies. And we have heard how important it is for labor policies to be coordinated, for policies of attracting labor migrants in order to address labor shortages, for health policies, for education and training policies, for pension policies, for fiscal and structural policies. And there's very important work that has been produced by the OECD very recently, a paper on the fiscal implications of aging, and more papers are on the pipeline. This panel will benefit from the kind of evidence-based policy approaches that the OECD is known for and well reputed and respected for, addressing real policy challenges, and addressing real policy challenges by drawing on the different national experiences. And we have for that an excellent panel comprising both policymakers and policy experts. And before coming to our panel who is physically here with us, I will begin by giving the floor to two ministers who are with us online, actually who are with us through their video messages, starting from Minister Niki Kerameos, who is the Minister of Labor and Social Security of Greece. She was also, before that, the Minister of Interior and the Minister of Education, Religious Affairs. She's been a member of Parliament since 2015. She's a lawyer by training, having studied at the Université Paris II, Panthéon-Assas, and the Harvard Law School. And she has been particularly involved in community service through the Desmos, a nonprofit foundation of which she is the founding member and first president, and awarded for her pro bono legal services to homeless groups in New York City. So we're very honored to have her, unfortunately not physically with us because there is an intergovernmental meeting today between the governments of Greece and Cyprus. So none of the ministers could be here with us physically, but we have a recorded video message and we're very happy to listen to that. So Minister Niki Kerameos.
I deeply regret that I could not be in person with you today due to prior commitments. Nevertheless, I would like to take this opportunity to briefly share Greece's strategic approach to addressing one of the most pressing challenges of our time, the demographic transformation that is reshaping, I would say, our labor market and our society as a whole. Following a prolonged economic crisis, Greece has made important progress in reducing unemployment and strengthening its labor market institutions. However, demographic shifts, including population aging, declining birth rates, and brain drain, demand a long-term and coordinated response. For this reason, the Greek government and the Ministry of Labour and Social Security in particular have been implementing a comprehensive plan to address the demographic challenge and to promote employment opportunities across all age and social groups. And we're particularly focusing on those populations that still have room for improvement, I would say, as far as employability is concerned. And I say this because unemployment has been reduced by 10 percentage points roughly in the past 6 years. We were at roughly 18%, now we're down to 8%. But yes, we do still have room for improvement. So we're focusing on those population groups where we see significant room for improvement, and in particular, women. We are expanding access to quality childcare services, promoting flexible work arrangements, extending parental leave, supporting female entrepreneurship. Our goal is to ensure that all women can balance family and professional life. Since 2019, female unemployment has decreased by 54% as a result of these targeted labor market policies. For citizens over 50, we're promoting active aging policies and lifelong learning initiatives. Targeted subsidized employment programs encourage businesses to retain and hire experienced workers, while digital training and upskilling opportunities enable older employees to remain competitive in a rapidly changing economy. The removal of institutional barriers that previously limited pensioners from working has led to a most significant increase in the number of working pensioners, from approximately 35,000 to more than 250,000 working pensioners. For young people, we're investing in internships and innovative employment programs that connect education with the labor market. Since 2019, youth unemployment has fallen by 48.4%, thanks to targeted measures such as career days, the strengthening of VET, vocational education training, vocational schools, public employment service training centers, as well as subsidized employment programs for young people. These initiatives are particularly valuable for those who may otherwise lack professional experience or qualifications, as they provide employers with incentives to hire and train young workers. A key element of our approach is also the Rebrain Greece initiative. We hold various events in various cities of the world where many Greeks left mostly and went and worked there during the financial crisis. We have held 4 events so far: London, Amsterdam, Stuttgart, Düsseldorf. Next event is coming up on December the 7th in New York. We travel together with some of the largest Greek companies that are looking for qualified, experienced personnel. And at the same time, we reach out to all Greeks living in those cities, living in those countries, to bring the two closer together and to lure them back to Greece. Moreover, through large-scale upskilling and reskilling programs co-financed by European and national resources, we're equipping workers of all backgrounds with the skills required for the green and digital transitions. Together, all of these initiatives form the foundation of a resilient, inclusive, and forward-looking labor market capable of meeting Greece's demographic and economic challenges with confidence, adaptability, and vision. Thank you very much, and warmest congratulations to the team in Crete for this fantastic event.
So you have heard the Greek experience as directed by the Labor and Social Security Ministry, an experience of spectacular unemployment reduction, at the same time horizontal policies and targeted policies of upskilling and reskilling and lifelong learning, and also policies of raising the employment rates in particular categories that are underrepresented in the labor market: women, younger people, older workers, foreign workers, and also a brain regain to recapture a big part of the diaspora and the brain drain that Greece suffered over the previous decade. So we now have the honor to introduce the Minister for Inclusion, Social Security and Migration of Spain, Elma Saiz Delgado. She has been serving as Minister of Inclusion, Social Security and Migration since 2023. She was a Regional Minister of Economy and Finance of Navarre before that. Quite notably, and in her bio, I read that last year she announced that she intended to grant work permits to 300,000 undocumented migrants a year in a 3-year scheme to boost the nation's labor force by 900,000. So I'm sure that she has a very interesting experience to share with us. And the floor goes to Elma Saiz Delgado, Minister of Spain, for this pre-recorded message.
Queridos y queridas colegas, es un placer poder dirigirme a ustedes, aunque sea de forma virtual, en este segundo foro sobre la dinámica de la población de Creta de la OCDE. España comparte plenamente el objetivo de este encuentro: analizar cómo las transformaciones demográficas están reconfigurando nuestras sociedades y mercados laborales y cómo las políticas públicas deben adaptarse para que nadie quede atrás. Vivimos en una Europa que envejece, donde la sostenibilidad económica y social dependerá de nuestra capacidad para aprovechar todo el talento disponible. Esto exige políticas integrales, fomentar la participación laboral de las personas mayores, promover la igualdad entre mujeres y hombres y facilitar la formación continua a lo largo de la vida. Pero también implica entender la migración como una oportunidad, una herramienta esencial para responder a los desafíos demográficos, a dinamizar nuestros mercados laborales y a enriquecer nuestras comunidades. Desde España estamos impulsando un modelo de migración regular, ordenada y segura, vinculado a las necesidades del mercado de trabajo y basado en la integración plena de las personas migrantes. Un modelo que refuerza la cohesión social y que es, al mismo tiempo, profundamente europeo. Frente a los desafíos del envejecimiento, la respuesta debe ser colectiva y humana. Debemos construir sociedades donde todas las generaciones y todas las personas, vengan de donde vengan, encuentren su lugar. Confiamos en que este foro contribuya a fortalecer la respuesta conjunta de Europa ante los retos del envejecimiento y de la movilidad humana. España seguirá trabajando junto a la OCDE y a los países miembros por un modelo social que combine crecimiento, cohesión y derechos.
So a very interesting experience from Spain, targeting labor migration to address shortages in the labor market in a very organized way through creating legal avenues that deliver. And this brings me to today's panel. And I'm very glad to welcome here today with us Tom Bevers, who's an advisor general to the Belgian Federal Ministry of Employment. And I will say more about you before giving you the floor, Tom. Kostas Meir, who is with us, I assume, online. Douglas Warner III, Professor of Economics at Yale University. Hello, Costa. And last but certainly not least, Feliz Unsal, Deputy Director at the Policy and Research Branch at the Economics Department of the OECD. So let me start with you, Tom. Tom, you have a very broad record of expertise in the field as Advisor General to the Belgian Federal Ministry of Employment, Chair of the OECD ELSAC, which is stands for Employment and Social Affairs Committee, Working Party on Employment, and particularly the expert group on AI in the labor market. Tom Bevers is also chair of the management board of the European Labour Authority and was the chair of the employment committee of the European Union, and several other activities and posts that I need not mention in this very rich biography of yours, Tom. And I would like to kick off by asking you in particular what strategies, in your view, can guide policies to address the complex demographic issues, and what benefits could such a holistic approach offer? Tom, over to you.
Thank you. Um, well, yesterday there were already references to the OECD Employment Outlook of this year that came out in early summer, and I really think it came at the right moment. Because it presents us with all the facts. Just to recall the numbers that Shruti Singh presented yesterday, aging alone could reduce potential GDP per capita growth by around 40% by 2060. Overall, even more, around half of it in Belgium, if we continue with current policies. And that is not fate. It's a call for policies that make a difference. And importantly, for me to keep in mind as well, policies can make a difference. For those who doubt that, I often refer to what another beautiful Mediterranean island, Malta, did for its female employment rate in quite a short time. They made a huge difference. So let me try to come forward with 5 policy lessons. One is we really need to move from a reactive to a preventive policy. Governments have a tendency to react to problems, including demographic pressures, once they show up in fiscal costs or in labor market shortages. And in times of tight budgets, this is, of course, more true than ever. However, we should really look towards a preventive approach, investing at the same time in employability, in health, in family policies, in the kind of strategies that Minister Karameus presented that can sustain participation across the life cycle. And this kind of social investment, when we think about investment, we often think about investment in infrastructure, but this kind of social investment is really important. Together with Spain and Minister Sayes in particular, we as Belgium used our EU presidencies in 23 and 24 to underline the value of such a social investment, and we try to convince also finance ministers of it. The work is clearly not done, but as societies we shall not forget that this is really important. The second thing I want to underline is that we need to integrate labor skills and health agendas. A healthy, skilled 60-year-old is clearly a potential asset for the labor market. That's a fact. Now, just to be a simplistic economist for a second, the labor market being a market, well, it will do part of the job to adapt to that fact by itself. However, the health and education systems, being systems, they may need somewhat more of a push. And so Professor Scott rightly referred to health policies and why it's hard to get them to refocus on prevention. Belgium has a huge problem with long-term sickness benefits, and we are taking steps to get a system to help us to keep people active while also taking care of them, but we still have a long way to go. Education and lifelong learning policies are essential. It has been repeated many times. I guess we all agree. However, I also agree with what Professor Turovic yesterday said, that until now, they may not have made the big difference that we expect from them. That is, in my opinion, because these systems as they exist now are just not up to the task. We haven't been able to build systems with the scale that we need. We are struggling with that. Belgium has a good system of paid education leave, which helps workers to reskill. But as many countries, we have not gotten the design of the system, the incentives, the financing of all of it right and up to the scale we need. Moreover, we really may have to rethink a society where we put scarce young people in education for many years, maybe combined with some work in hospitality or in a supermarket, with in some countries important delay mechanisms, making that they study even longer than they should. Like, well, retaking the Panhellenius exams here in Greece, but we also have examples in Belgium. And then we hope that they will find an entry job, and in that job they will learn what they really should do, the skills they really need. And then we are now in a context where these entry jobs, some of them can be done by AI. And then after all of that, we still expect that they will spend many hours learning and relearning things throughout their career. I'm not sure this is a sustainable model in the long term. And then as labor market policymakers, we are also confronted with the fact that we may gradually have to say goodbye to some policy levers that we really have become attached to. The classic job of labor market matching that the public employment services do is also taken over by online systems, more and more equipped with AI as well. And unemployment is decreasing. In many countries, it has become quite low. And so unemployment benefits as policy incentives is also becoming less relevant. So we may have to readjust really our policy levers. A few short other elements. Of course, we need to address all underused talent pools simultaneously. Sam underlined earlier for Greece that while closing gender, migrant, and age gaps together can recover much of the demographic growth loss. This goes for many countries, and in that context, in Belgium, we produce every 2 years a very broad diversity report on the Belgian labor market, and we then invite sectoral social partners to discuss the specific situation in their industry, looking at their challenges and their opportunities, and helping them to find specific solutions for their situation. We really cannot afford to underutilize talent, and the role of social partnership, I think, it's important to underline that. Then I already referred to technology, and that's my fourth point. I really believe that the demographic and technology challenges, they need to be tackled together. The interplay can be complicated, interesting. Professor Diakitopoulos explained this yesterday. I already referred to the risk for young people, but I also believe in the opportunities for older people. Models such as ChatGPT that we all learn to use, well, they first and foremost need the right instructions, no? And so I guess older people are just better in that than younger people. So that is something to use in this context. And then maybe in contrast to the demographic change, AI and technological change, we as policymakers, well, we can probably do more to influence the evolution. So we need to make sure that we create complementary work, invest in digital skills, again, involve social partners. In the context of the OECD and the expert group that you mentioned, we are working on an OECD recommendation on AI in the labor market. I hope we will be able to deliver. This means I also hope that the US administration will see the benefit in joining forces and combining the best thinking throughout the OECD, because I think it's really useful to make sure we get some guidance on that for all of us to work with it. And then the final thing I want to say is, in fact, the starting point of what you said, Ambassador, that we need a holistic approach. Isolated reforms, they have a tendency to cancel each other out. Raising the pension age or reducing early retirement without investing in health and learning, well, it simply shifts people from early retirement to disability. We tried this in Belgium, and we've proven that this is what happened. Along the same lines, expanding migration, as has been underlined today, without integration, well, basically this is a recipe for underemployment. So we need coherent strategies. and that is why the OECD indeed is very well placed to help us. If we stay passive, well, then this whole demographic challenge is just going to play out as the numbers that were shown yesterday. And we can really make a difference with integrated policies to make sure that this longevity, which is really a positive thing. It has been said many times, but we should not forget that we can turn that into prosperity. Thanks.
Thank you, Tom. You have made a very compelling argument on the benefits and the need for a holistic and a 360 approach of coordinating all different policy sectors. And of course, a question that would immediately rise is how do you manage the political economy of redesigning so many different systems at such a range and depth, pension systems, education and training, labor systems, health systems that you mentioned. Do you have a brief response to this challenge?
It's never going to be easy. I do believe, however, that if you present a coherent narrative to the society, to the population, it's easier than if you do it piecemeal. And it's also, well, and it's better policy because they all integrated. So integrating occupational health with primary care is an important one. We need to continue working on keeping people healthy towards their working life. Also, mental health is important. It's not been mentioned so often these days, but psychosocial risks was another area where we in the EU context work together with Spain, and I really hope that this will stay on the agenda. Pension systems. I do believe in the value of the pension age. Yesterday, Professor Scott said, well, this is maybe not an instrument that is working very well, but I do think that aligning it with life expectancy, or even better, with healthy life expectancy, is really something that people can understand as well. So, yeah, and then labor markets, institutions, there I think that, okay, I said many things about learning, but an important aspect there is to make learning outcomes transferable and portable. And the EU has announced a mobility package that would include measures in that sense to make sure that skills we acquire can be easily recognized and transferred. Mobility pathways. Greece is working with the OECD on mid-career mobility. We are working in Belgium also with the OECD on this. So finding ways to reassure people that moving from one industry to another is a step forward, is a good thing, and it's not a drama. And then finally, given my role in the European Labour Authority, I would also like to refer to fair and efficient labour mobility throughout the EU. Migration really shows that our labour markets are integrated, and this goes very much for the single markets of the EU. And this also means we have to look at them in an integrated way, also with respect to workers from outside. Greece gave the example yesterday of attracting workers from Egypt. From Spain, we heard about cooperation with Africa and South American countries. And this is all very good policy for the reasons that have been explained. But we shall not forget that, well, these people basically enter the EU labor market, and this could impact all of us, and this is another big reason to make sure that we cooperate on these things. And on finally on education, I think I said it also. Making sure that we have good policies and compelling narratives about health, about a pension system that rewards longevity, about labor markets that support mobility, and about education that renew skills, I think it would be possible to convince people, and I don't think we have a choice.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Tom. And I now move to Kostas Megir, Professor Megir, Douglas Warner Professor of Economics at Yale University, with a very rich academic CV, member of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, fellow of the Econometric Society, co-editor of Econometrica in the past, and the absolute leader in the economics profession journals, joint managing editor of the Economic Journal, currently focusing on his research on informal labor markets, labor supply and welfare programs, the economics of family, and also human capital and early childhood development. Kostas Megir is involved in designing and testing early childhood development interventions in both developing countries and the US, aimed at improving child outcomes and mitigating the intergenerational transmission of poverty. So it just shows us the breadth of experience that is brought into the discussion of addressing the demographic challenges in our societies. And Kostas, thank you for being with us. Thank you for waiting so patiently or from the other side of the Atlantic, and also for waking up so early in the morning. Now, based on existing evidence, which policy measures do you think are most effective in sustaining active labor markets at a time of aging populations, and what parameters would you consider as critical to this end?
Well, first of all, thanks very much, and thanks for the honor of inviting me. It's such a great panel and an event. Now, let me just make it very, very clear. I think we're in a really deep demographic crisis. Perhaps we should just mention a few numbers, right? The Greek fertility rate is 1.3. The median fertility rate in the EU is under 1.5. Right, the replacement rate is supposed to be 2.1, right? So we are heading to very, very difficult areas, together with a huge resistance to change, at least in some corners of Europe, the retirement age and all the comforts of the welfare state. Disability was mentioned. Partly disability has become a substitute for early retirement. So I think there is, as the previous speaker said, basically we need a whole toolkit of policies. So basically, if you just crunch the numbers, it's inescapable. You either have to increase productivity, or enough, and or the length of working life, and or migration, and or fertility. It's inescapable. It's the population is shrinking, and the dependency ratio is rising. Greece, in a few years, will have a dependency ratio over 50%. So I've been thinking about this, quite a lot. To increase productivity, well, you have to do a number of things, other than make sure we deregulate the labor markets. We ensure that welfare programs are targeted where they should be targeted, right? And we improve education quality. So education quality in places, for example, like Greece, are very, very low, and very little is being done to address that. Learning outcomes are flat. Right. So so where does that take us from? Well, it's quite interestingly. I was looking at. I'm writing a paper now with some colleagues in Norway, and we examine the impact of preschool, for example, and we show that 1 year entering preschool in Norway 1 year earlier leads to about a 60% of a standard deviation improvement in math scores among low-income people. Now, I'm emphasizing this because that, first of all, that shows you a path for increasing productivity. 60% of a standard deviation is a very, very large amount, right? And this happens even in a place like Norway, which is wealthy. So number one, improve the childcare infrastructure in a high quality way. We have contrary results from Quebec, where expansion of preschool reduced child outcomes because the quality was low. So the devil is in the detail. What will that do? That will improve female labor force participation, right? So it's kind of win-win, right? You offer better childcare infrastructure, you improve learning outcomes in the future, that increases productivity, better match with new technologies, and at the same time you improve the career prospects of women who traditionally take care of the kids. However, productivity can take you so far. If you look at the productivity numbers in Europe over 20 or 30 years, they're not going anywhere. It's not as if, we have massive increase in productivity. And so, you can play around with this, but you're not going to increase it at the rate to counteract the aging population. So it's inescapable that we need a migration policy in Europe, and we need an orderly migration policy, and not a reactive one, but one that looks into the future. So what does that mean? That means that we need, as an EU, and of course as a country like Greece, to decide on a flow of migrants from parts of the world where there's an excess of young people, and these places do exist. We organize an education system that improves the assimilation of these immigrants, because without assimilation, all you're going to get is, the previous speaker was very charitable, underemployment, but you will also get social tensions, right? So you need a migration policy before we reach the absolute moment of crisis. We need to increase the flow of people that are entering our community, right? We need programs of assimilation, education, so that we can go forward. I mean, we've seen countries like the US, which traditionally, not perhaps now, was welcoming to immigrants. It never had a social problem from this. All it had is growth and success, right? That's totally clear to me. For all this, there are problems in countries like Greece with language and so on, right? So we have to kind of think of how we're going to expand immigration in places like Greece, where the language barriers are, of course, stronger than. I guess it's a small country with its own specific language. So what are the returns to learning Greek relative to the returns to learning German or French? That's a big question that policy will have to deal with. I also think that we need even stronger EU integration and coordination of policy. Right? In some sense, we shouldn't. The fact that you've got a crisis in a small place like Greece, should be able to be smoothed out over the entire European continent. We don't talk about the aging crisis in Iowa, right? Because it kind of doesn't matter. There's really free flow within the US, right? So we need this kind of feeling in the EU, and it doesn't quite exist yet. The crises are not integrated within the whole EU, which would of course smooth them out and make some problems easier to solve. So I think thinking about how we can improve the EU institutions and deepen them, I think we've kind of lost a bit the vision of an ever closer union, which I think is really. So let me summarize. If we're going to deal with the crisis, we have to address various different fronts. On the one hand, we need to increase the length of working life. We have to increase the size of the labor force. The obvious margin there is female labor force participation. But in order to do that properly, we need to take care of the childcare infrastructure. If we do that, we have a double win. We have more women in the labor market, and we have better learning outcomes if we do it properly. And finally, we need a migration policy that deals with properly with assimilation and allows a renewal and a dynamism that is a bit lost from our union.
So thank you, Costa. I was relieved that you kind of culminated your rather sobering message with a more optimistic tone in the end. But you certainly pointed out the complexity and the magnitude of the challenges by also pointing to the different policy areas that are affected that should be enlisted to addressing the demographic challenge. You mentioned at some point the limits to raising productivity rates, and I'd like to ask you very briefly to tell us what types of investment do you think should be prioritized in terms of seeking to foster innovation within our aging societies?
The first bit is institutional. We really need to make the EU much friendlier to investment and entrepreneurship. We don't have the kind of freewheeling capitalism that we have in the United States, and this is showing at the moment in divergence in growth. So that's absolutely key. Then, of course, all else will follow. Things like taking advantage of new technologies. How far they will take us, I do not know, but clearly there's a feeling that things like AI will have some impact and have to be managed, of course, properly. As of course they're going to displace a lot of people, so that's going to be an issue. But without deregulating labor markets and without making sure competition is vigorous within the both at the product level and the labor market level within the EU, we're not going to go very far. So I think the brakes on productivity are very much institutional. Everything else will follow.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Costa. Let me now move to Feliz Unsal, the Deputy Director of Policy Research Branch of the Economics Department. After thanking you for your leadership role in the Crete Center and the work that is being done, you coordinate major flagship publications such as the Economic Outlook and Going for Growth publications of the OECD. You have been head of the Structural Policy and Research Division, overseeing work on productivity, investment, AI, demographics, and climate adaptation and modeling, among others. And with your vast background and experience in the field, I would like to ask you how vital do you think, Feliz, is an integrated policy approach for addressing the economic and fiscal challenges posed by population aging, and what are the OECD estimates for the potential impact of fiscal and structural reforms over the long term?
Thanks, George, and it's an honor to be in this panel. And I also, from my side, I would like to thank the organizers for this beautiful event in this beautiful town. So thank you so much. So we have been talking about the integrated approach, comprehensive approach, why we need it. Before I start with that, maybe that, of course, we would like to be optimistic about the implications of aging and longevity for our economies, for our societies. But I would like to point out that we also need to be realistic. And because not being realistic and thinking in terms of economic growth and fiscal costs would mean that we are turning a blind eye on a crisis that we are going through. I would say one of the most important economic force, the trend that we are going through. Therefore, as a good OECD economist, let me put some numbers to this. So first is that, of course, aging populations are affecting economies through different channels, and some of this we identify in our recent paper of the Crete Center, which was published about a couple of months ago by Vivian Georgiopoulou and Hermes Mograni. You will find online. Is that so? There is one very clear aspect that the working age is declining, and which implies that we have an increase in the dependency ratio. So we have people over 65 age growing at 2.2%, whereas the birth rate, as mentioned before, is much below the 2.1 of the stabilizing rate. And even the working age population growth is actually around 1% at most in among OECD economies. This means that, of course, there's a big change in the economy. This will have implications just from the decline in the working age populations. We are looking into the GDP impact around 8% over the next 3 decades. And for some economies, this number actually reaches up to 20%. So now this is just from a very mechanical thing from a decline in the working age population. Now, as we have seen yesterday, also again, the work of the Crete Center is that there could be also the productivity impact. That's a bit more uncertain, but you may assume that there's some impact we can also expect there. And on top of it, our economies are facing with skill gaps. For Greece, JAM's work indicated today that 70% of the firms are facing labor shortages, which could, in principle, in some ways, maybe also coming from aging populations. So it's a complex challenge. When we look at the public financing side, there are obviously 3 big elements there that aging populations are affecting government balances. These are higher pension rates, healthcare expenditures, and long-term care spending. And all of these are predominantly provided by public sector. That means that if you put all these numbers together, by 2060, we are looking into increasing fiscal pressures around 7% across OECD economies, and about half of it is coming from aging populations. So, of course, the impact could also come from not only spending side, but also government revenue side through the labor income tax. But let's leave that aside for now. The third channel is, of course, through saving investment, balance in the economy, and potential change in the neutral interest rate, which affects that dynamics of the governments. In this case, actually, this may work positively in favor of better government debt dynamics. But in any case, the fiscal challenge is there. So at the OECD, we have done some simulations in the paper that I just mentioned, and look at what type of policies governments can do in order to undo some of these or mitigate some of these fiscal and economic challenges countries are facing due to aging. What we have found is that when you look at from a fiscal side, for example, if you are thinking of increasing the spending in activation policies, lowering tax wages, or the pension programs, it is a possibility that the governments can mitigate some of these costs, about half of it, around 4 percentage point of GDP, by taking action on the fiscal and structural side. So now, of course, as we mentioned before, this is a holistic approach is required, because once you do some policy, you may have a negative impact on some others. Other panelists also mentioned yesterday as well. On the structural side, these policies need to be complemented by removing barriers to longer working lives, and also boosting labor force participation of older workers, as well as other underrepresented groups. On top of it, of course, we should not forget the lessons that we learned from yesterday's discussion on longevity, and promoting healthy aging and preventative policy action should be at the core of all this, because remember that aging doesn't start when you are 60, aging starts when you are born. So therefore, we need to make sure that the preventative health care is a part of the policy package. So in addition to this, it's actually even more complicated than maybe so far described, because it interacts a lot with other structural forces in the economy. Professor Megrer mentioned about the technology and AI. We all have very big expectations about AI, what it could deliver for our economies. But at the OECD, our work shows that actually all of these productivity gains, macro gains that we expect from AI comes down to adoption by firms and by households. How much they trust AI, how much they can use AI for firms, including in their operating processes, not just using ChatGPT. That also includes, of course, the labor. There has been some evidence on elderly populations adopting less of the technology in the previous technological rounds of ICT, computers, etc. We do not want and we cannot afford our elderly populations not to, again, left behind with this new technological change that we are facing, and we are expecting it to be a very major change, both economically and societally. So adopting training programs, maybe, we mentioned sometimes it doesn't work. Maybe that to target specifically on AI, now that we know this force is very important coming, and maybe there are some silver lining there, that of course AI is also tends to be more user friendly than the previous technologies. So there are certain gains maybe that we could adopt. And one more thing on the technology that I would like to mention, it's not only that the aging could have impact on the macroeconomic impacts of technology or AI that we could expect. We could also expect technology and AI to improve the lives of elderly populations. Of course, the improvements in healthcare is a part of it, but also the use of robotics for elderly care, which we know that is a big part of the solution in some of the Asian economies like Japan and Korea that went through similar demographic changes much before some of the other OECD or European economies, that the inclusion of robotics in elderly care and is critical, especially given that we are facing labor shortages, including in the healthcare system. So to me, it seems to me that we have a very complicated problem, but we also have various tools, but they need to be designed properly, as Professor Megler also mentioned, the quality of these policies, how they are designed and implemented, and how much of a public awareness is there, how much of a decisive policy action is there from the public authorities. It matters a lot. I hope we succeed.
Thank you, Felice, and you gave numbers to the particular specificities that are involved in this problem in terms of the drag on growth, in terms of the fiscal spending challenges. You also mentioned that governments can mitigate the cost of aging. It is not a challenge that we can resolve. We can mitigate its effects, but you also pointed to the opportunities of technology and AI and the positive changes that they bring, and also in empowering the ability of governments to tackle some of the dimensions of the demographic challenge. And let me come back to you with a question, because the great advantage of the OECD, among others, is apart from the fantastic quality of its people and the research, is the ability to do horizontal cross-border work in bringing all these different sections and sectors of policy together in trying to devise holistic approaches. And to ask you, how can the OECD research help countries in developing these long-term strategies for managing demographic transition?
Thank you, George. Yeah, as you mentioned, our comparative advantage is to do cross-country evidence-based research, and in all our work, particularly the policy implications, what can be done, what are the best practices, is an important part of our work. But also that, establishing a policy dialogue among policymakers through our committees, through our centers like Crete Center, and bringing more awareness on the urgency of the demographic crisis is also an important part of it. One thing that I would like to mention is that this challenge we mentioned, we are looking into a complicated problem. This is not just about let's increase the pension age. It's much beyond that. Or let's just train the elderly population. Again, it needs to be very well thought and very well designed. there are important interactions. The way that we help this at the OECD is to set up a very robust research frameworks to try to look at these at sometimes using industry level data, sometimes households and firm level data, to look at these issues as detailed as possible, giving the due importance of various issues around it. So I think both the research that we do has a policy impact we would hope to see, but also the policy dialogue that we contribute, including through Crete Center, I think is key.
And the policy impact that you mentioned is really one of the most important contributions of the OECD. The OECD being a trusted advisor to all its member governments and beyond. Countries also outside the OECD rely on the OECD know-how to gain this precious knowledge, and we have seen this at work in these 2 days in the conference and also in this panel. Drawing on the different national experiences in addressing challenges that are very much common challenges, and also drawing on the multiple experience and data and the granularity of the case studies that have been presented, and of course the experience of our policy experts in this panel. So it remains for me to thank you for this panel, Tom Bevers, Kostas Megir, Feliz Unsal. Thank you so much for this excellent discussion. And I think I now need to give you the floor for your closing remarks.
Yeah, thank you. So let me just move here quickly, and so we are gonna keep it short. I think this panel discussion was a perfect way to end this 2 days of interactions and talking with colleagues, with friends, people from different backgrounds, from academia, from policymakers, even sometimes in different fields, bringing together to resolve this issue that we are all facing, this urgent issue and very important issue. We have had excellent discussions during the 2 days, and I think everything will be online later for you to take a look or to check again the paper cited, the work cited, the OECD or outside. I would like to thank our organizing teams first and foremost, and maybe we can take a turn of applause for them from the OECD team, Sarah and Sumaya. From OECD Crete Center, we have, nice. We have Antigone and Apostolos from the OECD Crete Center side, yeah. And as well as from Delphi Economics, we have Mary, yes, yeah. And thanks a lot for all of you for participating this wonderful conference, and see you next year. Thank you.